If we leave, they take over. And so those sort of things came together in August in Afghanistan. And it's a hateful thing, and I very much regret that that's the situation that existed at the end. The need to leave should have been conditions-based, not time-based. We picked a time, we set the time, we got out because that was the principal thing that we wanted to do, and everything else flowed from that decision.
And by the way, General McKenzie isn't the only one who is saying that now or at the time a year ago when Afghanistan collapsed, a lot earlier than anyone thought, even though the president was warned at the time. It could be fast, it could be nasty, and it could be, well, brutal. That was then. Views now from General David Petraeus, the former CIA director, Army retired general, much more kind enough to join us now. General, I'm sure you've heard some of General McKenzie's musings on what happened and how quickly it happened, and the fact that others in command were warning the president at the time, President Biden, that there would be trouble. They were not in favor of the pullout at that point, but the president was the commander-in-chief and they followed his orders. But there was still lingering and remains bitterness, because General McKenzie was talking about how Taliban has not only strengthened but apparently endorsed and comforted the enemy, the very people who we were supposed to be policing and keep out of Afghanistan, al-Qaeda itself. What do you make of that?
Well, first of all, I obviously had a different view last year as well. In fact, I think it was on Fox that a month or so prior to the withdrawal stated that I feared a psychological collapse of Afghan forces when they knew that we had left, and also that our contractors who maintained their helicopters, our lifeline really to the commandos, the reinforcements, and to close air support, left as well. Really the past two administrations, because it was the previous administration, of course, that made that disastrous agreement, which trusted the Taliban, who said that they would not allow al-Qaeda, they would not allow international extremists to have a sanctuary in their country. The current administration could have reversed that policy, as they did a number of others, the Paris Climate Accord, the withdrawal from the World Health Organization, et cetera, chose not to, went ahead with it. And a year later, there we were with the emir of al-Qaeda, not just back in Afghanistan, but walking distance from the presidential palace in a home controlled by the acting minister of interior of the Taliban regime. Very impressive operation by our CIA and the counterterrorist community, and a good call by the president without question. But the fact that it was necessary, of course, really calls into question the withdrawal and trusting the Taliban to ensure that there was not a sanctuary once again for extremists, which is the whole reason that we went there and toppled them in the first place when the 9/11 attacks were planned there, and the Taliban refused to evict the al-Qaeda from their territory, and we had to come in and do that for them.
Well, you know, General, on that point, General McKenzie had said on that very point that he too said this was something that was a consistent policy, not only this administration, but the prior administration. The Trump administration has come back to say that they had a condition-based strategy that would not have allowed us to even consider leaving if the Taliban wasn't delivering on what it said. What did you make of that?
Well, there was no mechanism for doing something if they didn't do what they said. Again, once you're gone, Neil, are you going to go back in if they do, if they break the agreement? So I think that's a little bit fanciful.
So you think this would have happened under President Trump just as it happened here? If he were to set a goal and a date and a time and a place for departure, President Trump, of course, has said that wouldn't have happened because he wouldn't have done that.
It would have happened 6 months earlier. That was the agreement. He signed, his representative, the Secretary of State, signed the agreement, and I'm pretty sure they would have followed through. This administration extended it a bit to try to do a bit more planning, perhaps. The problem was that if you withdraw in the fighting season, as it is, in any event, you're going to open yourself up for what could be a very unhappy ending, which was, of course, what transpired.
So what happens now? What happens now, General? I'm sorry to jump in, but I just want to be clear where you see things going now, because al-Zawahiri, of course, was taken out in Afghanistan, and that surprised a lot of people that he was there in the first place. So is it fair to say that the billions that we've given, you know, to the Taliban, and now the $7 billion that we've frozen not to give them anymore, is a sign that they couldn't be trusted when this deal was scored, and certainly can't be trusted now?
Yeah, Yeah, and of course, they've got themselves to blame for the fact that we will not release at least half of that $7 billion that was frozen, because we were in discussions with them to do just that. But keep in mind here, Neil, the real concern actually is not actually al-Qaeda. The al-Qaeda senior leadership, the emir who was brought to justice a couple weekends ago and so forth, they have degraded very substantially. They have affiliates around the world that are of concern, and that we do continue to put pressure on places such as Yemen, and still with forces in a variety of other countries, and back into Somalia, I think a wise move by this administration. The real concern, though, is the Islamic State. That is the organization that has carried out horrific attacks, 2 of them yesterday alone, against a mosque and another gathering place, one in Kandahar, one in Kabul, that killed dozens and dozens of both Taliban officials and innocent civilians. They have been carrying out, again, truly barbaric attacks. And the concern really about international extremism coming from Afghanistan, I think, is much more connected with the Islamic State now than it is about al-Qaeda's senior leadership, though you clearly have to keep an eye on that, and that clearly was done. And again, even those of us who felt that there were alternatives to the withdrawal did state that there is absolutely the possibility of carrying out over-the-horizon counterterrorism operations, as we demonstrated. The challenge is that you have to fly a very, very long way to get to and from that unblinking eye that is the orbit over an area that is of interest to you. And if you're expending 60% of your flight time just getting to and from, you obviously have to have more assets to maintain the kinds of orbits that we would want to have. So the challenge is substantial. We have very, very substantial capabilities, and I'm confident that we can keep an eye on this. But the fact is, we're doing it without bases in the country that we were able to have before. And those were bases for the regional counterterrorism campaign, not just for the campaign in Afghanistan itself.
General David Petraeus, very good seeing you again. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Neil.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.